great to have you on the show, Marie.
Thank you, Susan. Pleasure and very honored that you have chosen me for your next podcast on a very interesting area, sort of the Asian style drinks, as I would call it. And yeah, a bit about my background. I'm a botanist. My life before drinks and food was botany. I did my first degree at Imperial College in botany and basically found that getting a job was damn impossible. With that, I went on to do a master's in marketing, spent the first 6 years of my life in the IT world, communications marketing, and gave it all up because I thought it was boring and I couldn't see myself working in that field longer than I had. With that, gave it all up, went into the Cordon Bleu, did my diploma very, very quickly, and also my WSET, and ended up with my wine and spirit diploma, and then got married, went off to Boston, and that was the end of my career. After 2 years in Boston, came back with a baby in tow, and never worked again, as in truly worked again. When my son was 7 and went to boarding school, I had a second child, and
Oh boy.
therefore and because of that, again, no work. But she went off to boarding school at 7, and that's where my real career started. I was picked up by a PR agency, did some work on wine during an event. A master of wine came up to me and sort of just suddenly said, "Marie, how come I haven't seen you on the judging circuit?" And I'm going, "Judging? What judging?" And that was the start of my wine judging. I'll say he, I won't tell you who it is, got me into the wine judging circuit, and I've been judging wines for the last, nearly 20 years. And then spirits came in, sake came in, and today I'm basically a freelance judge, communicator, writer, presenter in sort of wines, spirits, food, and basically just anthropology of what we've been eating all these years and drinking all these years, Susan. So that's the story of my life in a nutshell.
Oh my gosh, you know what? I'm going to have you on the show just to discuss all of that. But I've promised, number one, not to interrupt so much this time because we have so much to get through. And gosh, I want to ask you so many questions. It's going to be so hard for me. But why don't we start? Number one, maybe where just a teeny intro of where your love of Asian rice wine and spirits came, and then just go crazy. I know we're going to talk about sake and, excuse my pronunciation, shochu and soju and baiju today. So go crazy.
Okay, my love for all things to drink and eat has always been there. As a Chinese, that's what I am. I originated from Malaysia, from a little island called Penang, where food culture was a big thing. All we talked about was about
Of
food
course.
and drink, and that was it. So it's been in my blood, it's there, and it always has been there. The usual sort of been there, done that, tick the box. So that's where it all started. Okay, so let's look at wine back thousands and thousands and millions of years ago. Alcohol, where did that come from? I mean, there are two strains. You've got the Asian and you've got our sort of Western culture. Western culture shows in sort of, archaeological digs that cavemen were drinking some or eating some form of alcoholic drink. There are bowls with sort of munched up cereal, showing that even in the caveman days, people were probably soaking cereals that they picked or nuts and whatever, left them in bowls and maybe chewed them a bit to get a solution going. We'll talk about that in a bit later. And then created a beer or some sort of fermented drink with bubbles in it. That's the Western world. The Chinese world, same thing, millions and millions of years ago in China, not Japan. We start off in China. They found that bits of wine had already been made. They found sort of like sort of urns with grape seed residue way, 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 way back. So grape wine did exist, okay? And also, not everywhere could you grow fruit and grapes to create wines. So cereal, the Chinese found very early on that you can't turn a cereal starch into anything drinkable without doing something to it. So amylase in our
Of
mouths.
course.
You literally, whatever cereals, acorns, whatever they found, they chewed, they spat it in a bowl, right? Left it out in the open, allowed ambient yeast and probably bacteria that kept the solution nice and clean, ferment. 10 days, 12 days, 20 days later, bubbly porridge would appear. And by eating that porridge, they realized that they could get very happy. So that was the start of making some form of alcohol in China. Now, China then went on, they progressed, they made things like, rice wines and cereal wines. Uh, let's just look at that very quickly
Mhm.
before I go on to sake. So, rice wine, there are different types of rice. You have got normal table rice and you have got glutinous rice. As we know, glutinous rice has a lot more sugar in it. So the Chinese, being smart as they were, realized using glutinous rice created alcohol more quickly because it's already got the sugar in it. So they
Of
created
course.
um, a rice wine that's still available everywhere in China, and it's moved down Southeast Asia, and it's basically steamed. Now we use steamed. Okay, so what they do is you steam the rice. Glutinous rice is gloopy. You add your yeast and bacteria culture in it, and this is found as a yeast ball, which it's called chu, QU, and chu has in it bacteria, yeast, all sorts of fungus. Now, these fungi, namely Aspergillus, Rhizopus, and a few other fungus, actually grow in steamed rice. What happens is mycelium, the little mycelium sticks into a rice. Enzymes, amylase, protease breaks down the starch and proteins and absorbs minerals, whatever, to allow them to grow. And in doing so, create a sugary solution. Once this sugary solution is formed, yeast, ambient yeast from around wherever goes into it. You've also got bacteria, things like lactic acid bacteria. You've got acetobacteria. Why acetobacteria? Why lactic acid bacteria? Acids. Acids kill harmful bugs. So this is all, natural, the way of life, our universe. That's how we are still here today. So with all that in there, you get a cleanish pot of alcohol, and alcohol itself is anyway very antiseptic. That is the start of your uh, glutinous rice wine. Glutinous rice wine in China, as we know it today, is called mi chu. Mi meaning
Okay.
rice, chu as in wine. Besides that, you have got what they call huangju. Huangju is the newest thing. It's going to be the biggest thing, Susan. That is the next big bang, okay?
You heard it
And
now.
huangju is like a sherry, sweet, delicious, very, very complex. Aromatics, crazy, crazy, amazing. All right. Now, that is your huangju and your michu. You come down, Thailand, Vietnam, Malaysia, Laos, and Indonesia, and all the way to Philippines, they all make some sort of rice wine. All right. Now, whether they use glutinous rice or just normal rice, it is made. Loads and loads of different names for it. We won't go through that now. We'll do a 102 rice wine later on in the year, just to let you know. So that is rice wine. So the
Okay.
Chinese started it. We had that. Now, China and Japan had a lot of trade long before Japan closed its doors. So emissaries from China brought over their michu, rice wine, and possibly their huangju across to Japan to trade. The Japanese very fast learned how to make a rice wine. Like the Chinese, they use the same chu, the starter, and original Japanese rice wine was very much like the Chinese, terribly crude, very oxidized, and probably only drunk by the peasants. Wind the clock further. Around 5th century BC, there are remains to show that a more sophisticated style of sake, which basically means alcohol. The word sake is the same word as chew, just pronounced differently because
Okay.
different what you call it, different languages, but it's the same Chinese character. Chew, jiao,
Oh,
sake,
okay.
okay, is the same, okay, and actually, shu as in shochu, as in seishu, is actually the same shu as chew, as in Cantonese jiao, and in Hokkien jiu. So we're
Okay.
crazy people, Susan. I mean, it's the same character, same way of writing, but pronounced differently because we're all different nations. Okay, so
Of
5th
course.
century BC, they found that in Japan, people were growing rice, actually for eating. People lived in huts, and huts were made of clay, whatever, but the roofs were made of straw from the rice. So every day, farmers would go out, do their farming, come home, boil rice to eat, steam rice to eat. When there was leftover rice, it was probably left on the kitchen table. They go to sleep, they get up the next morning, and they go to work and do their own things. Um, then, somewhere along the line, someone found, ooh, one day, this rice is lovely. It tastes sweet. Okay, and from there they realized that rice itself had fungus growing on it, fungi, and the fungi growing on rice sort of naturally is something called Aspergillus oryzae. Aspergillus oryzae, like all this what I've been talking about, koji, chew, basically grows on rice, and it turns the starch in the rice grain into sugar, glucose,
Oh,
fructose.
of course.
So
Okay.
you've got straw roots,
Oh, yeah.
spores from the aspergillus falling
Uh,
onto nice, warm, cooked rice, growing happily, turns it into a lovely sugary solution. And amazake was formed. Amazake is just basically a porridge or a drink. I mean, today it's a drink because you press it, but in those days it's probably a porridge. Was very tasty, great for breakfast. And what they found was leave it a bit, probably ambient yeast, a bit of lactic acid bacteria, and boy, oh boy, oh boy, sake was created. So roll on forward, 9th century, temples, shrines started producing sake. Now, as we all know, alcohol's not great. It makes you go crazy. It makes you very happy. So sake in Japan was purely used as a religious celebratory drink. So only temples
right.
and shrines were allowed to make sake. Made in the same way, rice was sort of steamed, and then some of it was inoculated with koji. The rest was used for the main fermentation, and sake was born. 9th century,
Hmm.
roughly, yeah, 9th century BC, 9th century AD, when we've moved on to AD now, was when they started realizing that actually we don't have to eat sake as a porridge. We can actually drink it. So they learned to basically filter the sake very, very coarsely, using muslin, using cloths, whatever. So that
Okay.
was the start of actual drinking sake. And that's when what I call true sake began. True sake as we drink sake. So that's how sake was made. Roll forward, better quality, better sake. I'm not going to move any more into that. The procedures, the production got a lot better. And today, there are about 1,200 sake breweries in Japan, and it started growing again. So sake is becoming more popular, as we can see in the UK. We can buy a lot of sakes. There are about 12 different distributors of sakes. Um, Shops, supermarkets, and we can. I mean, I'll give Susan all the sort of names if Susan wants to put it on her blog as to where you can buy sake and who to
Absolutely. We'll have it.
contact.
We'll have it in the notes, in the show notes.
Okay,
Definitely.
so there you are. That's sake, how it's made. Now, sake is very complicated, as all Japanese things. Everything is very specific. Everything is done very cleanly. perfectly. There's notes in every single procedure, whatever. So in sake, there are 8 categories, namely Futsushu, which is your non-premium sake. And then within the premium sake range, there is Honjozo and Jumai. And then in the next level up, you have got your Jumai Ginjo and your Ginjo. And then you have got your top end Dai Ginjo and Jumai Dai Ginjo. And there's a special category called Tokubetsu, and Tokubetsu actually means special. And special meaning that this particular the sake made had an extra special step put into it. Whether it's something like, okay, you have got a Jumai Ginjo, which is our middling range of premium sake. If you see Tokubetsu Jumai Ginjo, it just means that, okay, we've done something extra to this uh, sake, and it could be something like polishing it to a higher degree. So technically, it's a higher type of sake, but they've dropped it down one level and call it special. It's like wine, you have your appellations, you have your your Van der Tar, VDQS, and things like that. And sometimes, you can bend the rules a little bit. So that's your 8
Oh,
categories.
I have a question.
Yes.
Just one question. That's special.
Mm-hmm.
Is it regulated, or can anyone throw anything and call it a special?
Oh, no. It's totally regulated. Hey, we're talking Japanese.
All right. I knew you were going to say that.
Okay, we're talking
It's Japan.
Japanese. There are only several methods of making something special. Either the polish rate is lower, a special rice was used, or it's special. Okay. Now, not putting more sugar in it doesn't make it special. All right, very quickly, ingredients in sake. There are only 4 ingredients in making sake today. Very, very regulated, and you cannot divert from this. Proper sake is made with rice, clean water, koji, which is your starter pack, your starter, and yeast. Only 4 things. Nothing is added into it other than possibly lactic acid. And lactic acid is added purely just to keep the whole pot nice and clean and bug-free. Okay, so that is sake. Right, we have talked about 8 categories of sake. We now talk about styles of sake. I am sure everybody's heard of sparkling sake. You have heard of a cloudy sake. We can have unpasteurized sake. So, there are different styles. We can have old sake, koshu. And when we talk about old sake, we're not talking about buying your most expensive bottle of Jumai Daiginjo at, I don't know, 200-300 pounds, putting it under your bed, and in 10 years' time think, oh, I've got a koshu that could be worth 20,000 pounds, because you'll wake up with a big shock. You'll probably have a bottle of oxidized vinegar with lots of cloudy clumps in it. So koshu is aged sake. It's made very specially, and it's been made from the start to become an old aged sake. Okay. So there you go. Styles. I've very quickly covered categories, styles, how it's made, and sake is delicious. Go find some and drink it. You can get some very decent price sakes these days in London. And if you join my British Sake Association, where I am the chairman, we actually have our own sort of selected sakes. And I think we're going to be selling it, our own sort of British Sake Association recommended sake, for about £12 a bottle.
Well, I'll have information about that too. In the show notes. One thing, will you just tell us, other than in cocktails, which we'll get to later, how is it usually drunk? Is it ever on ice, or is it always cold? Is it always hot? Give us the scoop.
Okay, sake is very versatile. Okay, because it's got very little acidity in it, because lactic acid is what keeps everything clean, as opposed to wine and citric acid and tartaric acid. It's very easy drinking. All right. So no, we never have it in ice because you don't want to dilute the sake any more than it is. It's delicate enough. It's got amazing aromas and sweetness. We tend to drink it either cold, warm, or hot. Now, being Japanese, the Japanese have poems for everything. There is even a poem for the sake temperatures that you would drink it at. Okay, I can't remember all of them, but basically it starts with 0 degrees, which is, drinking sake in the snow. All right,
Oh
so
my
it's
God, I
at
love
zero
it.
degrees. And then it goes up to like, 14, 15 degrees, drinking sake looking at the cherry blossoms.
Oh,
Okay,
how
so that's that.
romantic.
And then drinking sake at body temperature. And then you have drinking sake in an onsen bath. So it's beautifully
Ooh,
written. I do have the little um, diagram, but again, I think it's on my website, but you can look at it. It's beautiful. It's just sort of, the different. There's a
okay.
special sort of little phrase for the temperatures rather than 5 degree, 10 degree, 35. So it's beautiful. So that's drinking sake. Rule of thumb: the better the sake, the cooler you drink it. All right, not
Okay.
ice cold, but I mean a really top quality Junmai Daiginjo with a polish rate of, I don't know, 35. The competition style sakes, which is using Yamada Nishiki, 35% polish, and using yeast number 9 is your typical competition sake formula. If you're going to be drinking something like that, probably at about 5 to 8 degrees. Drinking warm sake, you tend to have the more savory style, what I call the lower polished rice, your sort of non-premium sake, up to your sort of junmais, which are a lot more savory. They're not as sweet. The rice hasn't polished as much, so basically a lot more proteins in it, a lot more minerals. And as we talked about protease and amylase, whether the sugar
Hmm.
digestion or the protein digestion. So protease turns proteins into amino acids. Amino acids gives you umami, a word that I think a lot of
All
people have
right.
been playing around with. So junmai sakes are a lot more umami, savory, the big, 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 big in your mouth. You can warm that up to drink. Okay, so drinking warm sake is for sort of, I'm not going to say lower end because it's not lower end. They're all delicious. All sakes have their own um, deliciousness. So the
Okay.
umami, higher umami, mushroom, earthier style sakes you tend to drink warm and not hot, not
Okay.
boiling, warm, 50 degrees centigrade at maximum. Okay, is that
Okay.
enough for
Now,
sake in a
just
nutshell
before we
here?
go on, no, just one more thing before we go on is that because you brought it up about polished. So I'm assuming that the more premium is the more polished.
Absolutely. Okay, very quickly, Susan.
Okay.
Sake is
And then I
made
promise that's the last question from me.
Sake is made, as I said, 4 ingredients: rice, koji, yeast, and water. Rice. The rice is the most important part. Okay. Now, unlike beers, where you just go get your wheat, you just go get your barley, throw it in a pot. Okay. Um, no, you don't. You literally sprout it. Okay. Once you sprout it, the little sprout comes out. That little sprout has a lot of amylase. And that is what happens. That amylase will stick itself into your little barley, um, pick out all the starch, turn it into sugar. And then what you do is you roast it or you literally just heat it through,
Right.
kill the shoot, and then um, that's how you make your beer. Now with sake, we cannot sprout the rice. If you
Right.
sprout the rice, you leave the rice grain whole. The rice grain whole means there's far too much proteins and minerals to create a delicate sake. What sake
Okay.
tries to do is to grind down, mill down a rice granule to almost where the starch is. So if you buy a
Okay.
bottle of 20% polished rice, in other words, that grain of rice from that goes down to 20%, you're getting only the starch. And if you're only using that starch to ferment, you're going to get a very clean, clear
Okay.
sake with very little umami. So the polish rate is important. And then we talk about this whole koji and aspergillus because something's got to turn that little bit of starch into sugar. And so that's where we go. So, okay,
Okay.
the way
Got it.
polishing rate goes is from 0 to 70% left of a rice grain gives you only a normal non-premium sake. After that,
Okay.
everything is premium. So if you polish that rice grain from 69 to 60, it becomes a honjozo or a junmai. And then
Okay.
from 59 to 50, it becomes a ginjo or a junmai ginjo. And anything under 50 becomes a junmai daiginjo or a daiginjo. Dai meaning big, the big ginjo. Ginjo meaning the aromatics of a sake. And
Okay.
today, you can get sakes that are 100%, which is just a normal sake, right down to 0%. Now you're going to say to me, 0%, there's no rice in it. Wrong. The way the Japanese work is, you got to round up. So if you ever find a sake, and they do exist, I tasted one in Madrid just 2 months ago in a competition, though I didn't judge in it. Basically, they had a 0% polished sake. That means that average, it was zero. The
Okay.
rice grains were polished for anything from 0.5 down to 0.1%. So it is classified as zero. And lastly, one last thing before we move on, when you buy a cheap sake, and I'm cheap meaning, in Japan, you can pick up a bottle of sake for about £1. So that to me is
Oh
cheap
boy,
sake.
really?
It doesn't mean that it's bad, but non-premium sakes, you can add stuff into it. Remember I said good sake is only made from 4 ingredients? With non-premium sake, obviously, they got to make a lot of sake. So they can use the rice powder from the polished rice. Nothing is wasted,
Okay.
environmentally friendly. Okay. Sometimes people do use the rice powder to make cheaper sake. All right. And they can add all sorts of stuff into it, like extra sugar, extra amino acids, fructose, everything to make that cheaper sake tasty. But it cannot be classified as a premium sake. And
Got it.
one more thing. Rice. There is sake rice, especially grown rice for sake. Sake can be made with table rice, i.e. the rice that you and I eat, but there are 120 sake rice varieties already specifically grown for sake.
Okay.
Okay, on that, I think we
Fabulous.
better move on, otherwise I'll
We've
just
done
talk nonstop.
sake.
We've done sake. So we've done sake, we've done rice wines, we've done fermented wines. Now, lastly, sake is not a spirit. Please, please, please. Anybody who says sake is a spirit, call me, come and speak to me, because I will go mental. Sake is a wine. Alcohol content, anything from about 8% sparkling sake up to a maximum of 22% alcohol of a non-diluted genshu. Genshu meaning totally non-diluted. It is as is. You can go up to 22%. After that, the yeast will die anyway. The koji will die, so
Okay.
fermentation just cannot get on any further. Okay, so there we go. Sake done in a nutshell. Let's go on to spirits. Okay, Asian spirits versus British sort of Western spirits. Again, the difference between Asian spirits and Western spirits is the wonderful koji, this fungus that's used. Don't get me wrong, Japan does make whiskies. It makes whiskies using the normal Western way. Okay, we're not going to go into whiskies today, but there are rums and gins and vodkas that are made in Asian countries
Of
with
course.
the normal way, maybe using different cereals and potatoes or sweet potatoes or whatever. But we're going to talk about Asian spirits. So the one main thing in Asian spirits is that it has to have koji. So I'm going to
Okay.
start with a Japanese spirit, a very old style Japanese spirit, and it's called shochu. Shochu originated from Japan, and it's basically it started off with sake. You've got lots of sake. If you don't drink up this cheaper sake that you've made, or it's not good enough to be drunk, what do you do with it? You turn it into a spirit, like the rest of the world. Yeah, if it's you're making whiskey, if it's not good enough, it ends up becoming a gin or a vodka. So same thing. Shochu is made from sake that has been distilled. That was the original
Ah,
shochu, okay? So that is one thing. Now let's look at Japan. Japan is a very long island with very different climatic changes from Hokkaido, where you've got snow 7, 8 months of the year, down to Kyushu, which has almost a tropical climate. Okinawa, it's tropical, okay? So,
right.
yes, you can grow rice and everything through Japan, but then when you come down to Kyushu and Okinawa, rice is okay, but it's got volcanic soil. These two islands have got a lot of volcanic soil, doesn't grow rice very well. So all the rice that is grown in the south is for eating. All right, Japan has a huge
Okay.
population, it needs rice to eat. So what they found was that, oh, we got to find something else to make alcohol that we like. And so sweet potatoes comes into play. You think, sweet
Ah,
potatoes. Now, how did sweet potatoes get into Japan to be turned into an alcohol? We wind back again, all right, back to the 10th, 11th century. And we said that China and Japan had a lot of trade going on, and Okinawa and Kyushu are closest to mainland China. So the sweet potato, which originated all the way from South America, yeah,
right.
that we're looking now
Yeah.
from South America, Vasco da Gama, we're talking of the Spanish and Portuguese big sailormen that sailed across to the Far East, yeah? So they brought
Yeah.
all their, I don't know what, across to the Far East. And of course, they were bringing back spices and whatever. And along the way, they were trading. So they hop into, we think it's probably Philippines. All right. So South America, all the way to Philippines, dropped off sweet potatoes there. The Philippines started growing sweet potatoes. And then from there, sweet potatoes slowly moved up into China, and then from China, China introduced sweet potatoes to Okinawa and Kyushu. It was a Japanese emissary that brought the sweet potatoes from China, Kyushu. So Kyushu started growing lots of sweet potatoes. And how much sweet potatoes can you eat? Not a lot. So they learned to turn the sweet potatoes into shochu. All right, and you're going to ask me next
Okay.
question. How did distillation get into Japan? Distillation, let's roll all the way back, okay? Centuries and centuries ago, started in Mesopotamia, yeah? What today is Iraq. We know that the first still, alembic, comes from the Arab lands in Mesopotamia, all right? There, Middle East, they didn't drink alcohol, not that we know of. So all the distilling was about perfumes, yeah,
Oh,
perfume and
yeah.
medicines and things like that, okay? Now, the still that was originated from there moved two ways. One way down into Europe, and that's how we started making our vodkas and that kind of stuff. The other way, it moved through India, and then India up into China, and we think it probably got into Japan through the trade and by ship into Kyushu from China, the shortest distance. So by the
Okay.
13th, no, wrong, 15th century. So Japan only started distilling much, much later on. It was the 15th century. They
Okay.
figured it out, and they were making this sweet potato fermented stuff that probably didn't taste very much. Probably tasted disgusting. They learned to turn sweet potato, distill the stuff, and it became shochu. All right, so that's the origins of shochu. Right, that's
Okay.
history. Right, production of shochu. Again, being Japanese, very, very, very strict production. Shochu can only be made from 55 agricultural ingredients. It has to be
Okay.
agricultural, okay? So sweet potato is one of them. Then you have got rice. Then you have got barley. Then you have got soba. Soba is buckwheat. And the last is sugar, brown sugar. All right, so sweet potato, we've touched on it. It is the most popular shochu.
Right.
It's basically made from sweet potato and the koji, um, the magic that turns the starch in the sweet potato into
Right.
a sugary solution tends to be grown on rice. So the substrate is rice. So a lot of the sweet potato koji uses rice koji to make into
Okay.
shochu. Alrighty,
Ah,
now
okay.
you want to
Okay.
get more
Got it.
complicated? Koji. There are three
Of
types
course.
of koji, okay? Three types of aspergillus, and that is the rice growing aspergillus. You have got yellow, white, and black. For making sake, it tends to be
Okay.
yellow. And yellow koji, you have to add lactic acid into it to create a stable, bacteria free solution. But for making shochu, we tend to use black or white koji. Black and white koji
Okay.
are the same. The white koji basically is the a mutation of the black koji, the sort of like the it doesn't have the melanin that makes it black. Okay, and it was preferred because in a lab or in a brewery, if you're using black koji, you come out black. There's black spores everywhere.
Okay.
Everything looks disgusting. So this professor managed to isolate the white spores of the original black and white koji and create this new white koji, which is exactly the same as the black, but just color. And so white koji is used today. Black and white koji
Okay.
doesn't work with lactic acid. Black and white koji actually produces citric acid within its own sort of as it's fermenting. So citric acid that it produces is what keeps your nice clean environment in your big tank. Okay, so
Okay.
okay, I'm stopping there. That's you're past 101. So anyway, so you've got sweet potato shochu, the biggest seller, and till recently it was the preferred drink over sake. Women have generally preferred drinking sweet potato shochu. And you want to talk cocktails? Basically, shochu drunk by women is sort of turned into a very simple spritzer using a fruit juice. And my favorite is using freshly squeezed grapefruit juice and a bit of soda water. So you drink your sweet potato shochu, squeeze off grapefruit and some soda water. It's delicious, and it's called a chuhai, shochu highball.
Okay. Question. Okay.
Yes.
One question. Why do you think that it was that the women liked it more than the sake?
Sake was seen as a peasant drink for a long, long time in Japan. I remember the very first time I
Ah.
went to
Okay. So it was
Japan,
social.
it's social. Sake
Yeah.
was, it was brewed and it wasn't very tasty. If you go back to sort of the sort of, I reckon, 1920s to 1950s, sake was made, it was just stored in terracotta pots. You would just bring your terracotta pot in, fill it up with sake, you go home. So it's very oxidized. It's probably like drinking sherry. Women, it's not seen as a drink for women, not sort of clean enough, as it were. Shochu, on the other
Okay.
hand, stores well. You can get it anywhere. A bottle of shochu will keep, there is no expiry date. Oh, forgot to mention, sake expiry date. The rule of thumb is that a bottle of sake should not be kept more than 2 years. After that, it will start deteriorating. Okay,
Okay.
sake should be kept stored cold. So if you got good sake, shove it in your refrigerator. It will keep for 2 years. But today things are changing, and sake brewers are playing with sort of aging and leaving your bottle of sake under your table or under your bed, but it's made differently. So I don't want to talk about
Okay.
that now, but rule of
No.
thumb, sake, if you've got a bottle, drink it within 2 years. Shochu,
Drink
on the
it.
other hand, ABV anything from 25 to below 45 can be kept like a bottle of spirit on your shelf. It doesn't deteriorate. Of course, don't put it under the sunlight for long, long periods of time or in high temperatures. So shochu, in a nutshell, 55 different ingredients can be used. So you've got sweet potato, the five that I talked about: rice, sweet potato, barley, buckwheat, and raw sugar. are the main ones, but you can get. I had a green tea shochu recently, and that was delicious. And so there are different ones you can get, but the main ones are just the five. What else can I say about it? How do they add the secondary ingredient, the 55 ingredients to the base? These are the five big ones are the base ingredients. They come out water white, and they
Uh-huh.
taste and smell of the ingredient that the primary ingredient that's gone in. With secondary ingredients,
Okay.
it's put in later. Okay, it's steeped into the ferment, and then everything is then what do you call it? Distilled. Okay, so the product still comes out white, but you get the lovely aroma of the
Oh,
secondary substrate that was put in it. I believe there is a company that's even making milk shochu. I haven't tried it, but I heard there is a milk shochu because milk is still an agriculture ingredient. Um, what else about shochu?
th-
Storing, as I
I know.
said,
I
is
can't wait
easy.
to try it.
Oh, let's do it. Let's do it. I've got a whole stack of shochus that we
I
can do.
know.
Or
Oh my
come
God,
and
it
do
sounds
my
amazing.
class. I do teach a certificate
Exactly.
class on shochu for the Sake School of America. I'm the only educator in the whole wide world outside of America that can teach the course. So we'll run a course. What else can I say about shochu?
Okay, cool.
It is great. It is used a lot in cocktails. It is now becoming very, very popular in the UK. You will get shochu cocktails, as I said, like a chuhai, shochu highball, or it's used in. I tasted one the other day, which was actually very delicious. It had sake in it, had shochu in it, had salted cherry blossoms, and delicious. And another one was using yuzu. Yuzu is
Oh
a
yeah.
citrus fruit, Japanese
Yeah.
based, and it's used in a lot of alcohols. Actually, sake, you can now get yuzu sake, which is delicious, and of course, plum sake. I didn't talk about that because technically, as a true sake drinker, yuzu sake and yuzu shu, they call it, and umeshu is not true sake. But you can make umeshu and yuzu shu using shochu. Yeah.
Okay.
What else can I tell you about shochu? There's just so much. It's
No,
impossible going
that's
through it
good for
today.
one on one. That's good.
Okay.
But I don't know if this is where you're going next, and you can tell me not. But of course, when I was talking to you before, I said, "Oh, we'll have to talk about soju," and you're like, "No, no, no, shoju. It's something completely different." Now, I don't know if we were going to go
Yeah,
right
yeah. Let's
to
go. Let's go into.
soju. Oh,
Yep.
great, great.
Let's do
Because
soju.
yes, I think that any maybe lay people may not have heard of shoju. They just think, oh, she's talking about soju in a different way. So tell me a little bit about soju, which hopefully I'm pronouncing right.
Okay. All
Okay.
righty. Wow, this is getting very, very, very interesting, Susan. Okay. Shochu, Japanese. Shochu. And the O on both have got the long line, which means it's a O. It's a
Okay.
U. Shochu. Shochu. Yeah, anyway, that's Japanese. We know Korea is Japan's neighbor. They do a lot of things together. They do their Korean, was it their no, I don't know, the Korean pop and Japanese pop and
Oh,
and
yeah.
and that's I'm too old for that. But anyway, they work together a lot. The Koreans and the Japanese, they've lived together. They have traded together, and so shochu somehow got into Korea, and Korea is known as soju. Soju. So if you go to an Asian supermarket and you say, I want to buy some shochu, look carefully. Shochu, Shochu, is Japanese distilled drink. Soju, Soju, is the Korean equivalent. And I'm going to say equivalent with a because soju is made more from grain. Yeah,
Okay.
it's more like the baiju. So actually, we're leading nicely into all the other um, spirits. Soju is normally made from millet, rice, oof, and other sort of cereals. Same thing. It uses a koji, okay, and it's more the rhizopus type of koji, the Chinese style koji. Uh, and fermented and distilled a similar way. But it's less filtered, less refined type of spirit, and its popularity dropped. But recently, Koreans, being amazing and know all about marketing, as we all know, decided to change its image, and they've started making soju that's been infused with fruit juice. So it's like a little alcopop.
Oh,
All right. So extra sugar is added into it. And you can buy soju drinks happily in Korea very cheaply. And it could be like, I don't know, apple, peach, shiso. Shiso is perilla. And the Koreans love this perilla. And you just buy them in alcopop type thing. You can buy it in this country. If you go to a Korean restaurant, there's always 2 drinks you can have that's Korean. Oh, 3 drinks. You've got beer, you've got soju, and the third one you can buy is makgeolli. Makgeolli is a Korean version of sake. It is made with rice, it's fermented,
okay.
only fermented, and it's unfiltered. And you buy them in glasses or in little tokuri, little flasks, and it's like pure white. It looks like milk, but it's got texture because it's still got rice grains in it. Okay, and very similar to nigori sake, which is sake that's been very coarsely filtered. So you get the texture of rice. It's quite nice. It's like drinking sort of a smoothie of rice with a little bit of alcohol. So that is Korea for you. Soju, yes, it's distilled. It's now more popular. You can find it with fruit juice. So definitely go try it.
Mhm.
It's quite delicious, very refreshing. Okay, so from soju now. And by the way, Korea has its
Yes.
own rice wines, as we said as well, which we're not going to look into it today. We've now looked at Chinese rice wine. We have gone on to sake. We've looked at shochu. We're now soju. Let's go on to the big, big, big topic, Baiju, China.
To China.
Back to big old China that started everything.